Welcome to Hoshiai no Sora Stars Align episode 7 or 8, either way. Last week we had the first leg of their kind of like setup practice match against Misaki Academy, and we saw that people actually take soft tennis seriously, enough that all of them lost, even though they did end up taking a single game off of most of the people that they played against. And I think we ended with our main duo going up against the other school's ace. So without further ado, let's see what happens this episode. I'm assuming they're going to redouble their efforts to get better at soft tennis. So without further ado, let's get started. The classic I want to beat everybody at a team sport. Oh, this is horrible. If you ever played pickup basketball, there's always that one guy who never passes, always shoots, just because he thinks he's better than everyone else. But it's a team sport at the end of the day. You can't just do whatever you want and expect to, win. And somebody forgot to tell this guy that it's a team sport. Literally, it's 2v2. So if you mess up your teammate, that's 50% of your team out of the equation. Someone needs to tell him that, you should probably try playing with your teammates instead of against them in a team sport. Okay. Every time they say something like this in this show, it gives me flashback to Sarazanmai, right? Because like a fundamental theme of that show was the kind of pairing. Like he wanted to be the golden combi with this other kid, like the two main characters of the show. And they spent like a lot of time talking about this. It's basically like an allusion to this homosexual relationship, which they don't really get into all that much, other than like the kiss that happens at the very beginning. So it's interesting to see like this show also kind of parallel that that experience where they have two people who are partners, but because of the way that Japan works, because this airs on like mainstream media, they're not really open to talking about it in a way that maybe we would in the West. Instead, they use like all these different analogies. In Sarazanmai, there was some very like openly strange imagery. But at the same time, they weren't too keen on discussing like the intricacies of this relationship that was going on. And in this case, we're also getting that, but we're seeing it through like this allegory of tennis, where like tennis is like you need harmony in the relationship. You have to be open to your partner's needs. You have to like anticipate what they're going to want, and like all that kind of stuff that you would normally talk about in a romantic relationship. We're now talking about in kind of this tennis context, and it's interesting to see that the show has been able to translate kind of these things that it wants to talk about, but maybe can't as openly as it would like to, into this kind of sports analogy, which we can more easily relate to. That being said, there are people in this show who are not involved in the sports who do have like relationships, which we'll see probably going forward. So this is a completely original piece of media, so you can't really know what's going to happen. Usually we have some clue of what to look forward to, in the sense of there's usually a light novel or a manga or something that things are based off of, but this is like a purely original production. Highly risky, by the way, to do a wholly original production with such a small studio, but hey, when you have all that isekai and cute girls doing cute things show money, sometimes you gotta splash out something for a director who shows up and wants to take your studio to the next level, I guess. He's playing 1v2. You would expect someone playing 1v2 to lose, and he's losing. Who knew that would happen? This guy clearly has some kind of like trust issues or like difficulty accepting that other people can also contribute to his success, which I think we've talked about before, in the sense that a teammate is something, even if like you have to accept that they're also contributing to your efforts and that they've also put time into it and they're also worthy of your trust. Which is something I guess good players have a bad, hard time dealing with, and also in your life you have a hard time dealing with. Some people, like this guy, just want to control their significant other and don't want to like believe that they can do stuff and like help you out in some way, and maybe it could be of use to you in some regard other than just you controlling every aspect of their existence. He's gonna learn the hard way, I guess, in this episode.
7ポイントを先に取った方が勝ちになるんだ。ややこしいな、変なの。
Yeah, exactly. If you think this is complicated, you should see real tennis. It's like, well, first it's 15, and then it's 30, but you think the next one is 45, but no, it's 40, And if both of you get 40, then you're just stuck there until one person scores 2 points in a row, and you have to score 6 games in one set to win. But if the other person scores 6 games, then you're in a tie break, and then it's just like complete randomness happens. You think this is goofy, real tennis is much worse. I don't think we give Maki enough credit for the fact that he only started learning soft tennis like 2 weeks ago or a month ago, and he's already like able to apply everything that he's learned perfectly to his body, and he's like perfectly coordinated, and he can apply all the skills that he's learned into useful strategies that he can employ in a match, all in the span of like less than a month. Let's give some credit to this guy. Clearly, when Toma was out looking for ringers, he picked the right guy, because I don't think anyone else could handle anything like this, much less actually bring like the ace pair of a professional like a soft tennis academy to the final game. Props to you, Maki. You've done really well. Your whatever money Toma gives you, it's not enough. Ask for a raise or whatever. You're clearly bringing more value than he knows. There we go. That's the acknowledgement I was looking for. But you have to trust them every time to take the shot, even if they miss sometimes. You have to trust that they know how to do it, and they will do it, and they have the ability to do it. And that takes a lot of trust. And for someone like him who believes so much in his own abilities and has, I think, this is where it comes from usually, been let down in the past by trusting others, they have a hard time trusting new people. It's just how it works. That's like his character flaw, the way that he works. But it's nice. This is like the character development that we're seeing in the progress of one tennis match. We're seeing like a character learn to trust other people. We're seeing the character who like has been yelled at this whole time be like, yay, I did good, you know, like I'm worthy of praise or whatever. This is character development over the course of a tennis match. I'm just saying that's what this show is good at. Just to comment on that a little bit, the key to a good relationship is effective communication. That's what we've just been taught by the show. I see you, show. I see what you're trying to do. Trying to teach us good relationship techniques through the medium of sports. I see what you're doing. Exactly. There's no end to a tennis match. A tennis match can go forever. Like, it can last till the end of time. If you look at some of the like longest tennis matches ever, they've been like 6-7 hours long. And they have to keep playing the whole time. And there's one time, you can look this up, who exactly was between, but I think it was between Federer and Nadal, and it happened like in the past year or 18 months, where they were playing one day and it went so long that it started raining or something, and they had to cancel it due to a rain delay, and they came back and started playing again the next day. This is the kind of sport that tennis is. Net shots are actually kind of looked down upon in the tennis world. If you ever watch like a pro tennis match, if they get a point by net, usually the person who got it will apologize because it's considered like a cheap shot. So what a way for this match to end. It's been pretty epic. Both sides have learned lessons, one side more so than the other. But just like this show's ability to convey like character development in terms of confrontation, which is something that we do see a lot. But I don't know if we've seen it. If we've seen it be like the main point of a confrontation is for one side to develop and change. Usually we're more interested in the outcome to some degree, because we're talking about like a tournament arc, or like the senpais are going to retire soon, so we have to get something done now type deal, which is not the case here. This is just like a random practice match. They're only playing for like the honor of the sport. That's it. And for them to be so invested in the outcome, even in such a match, kind of betrays, I think, the reason why people play sports in the first place. It's not only about the outcome, it's because you like the process also. If it wasn't for that reason, you wouldn't be so invested in it. And I think this kind of taps into that, and also kind of explores like the issues that a player like Oji Arashi would have in trusting his teammates, and then realizing when they start losing, when they get that negative feedback that, oh, I need to trust my teammate, and that's how we move forward at this. It's a very interesting couple of, or like episode 1.2 episodes that we've had here. That was obviously a huge deal. well, we didn't. I guess you didn't see like the part where his back was burnt, but we obviously learned about Itsuki, and a big part of this whole show is about like people whose trust or people in whom you've placed a lot of trust, and then they've betrayed that trust, and then like it's like how to learn to trust other people again, how to like get used to being vulnerable again, and like putting yourself out there, not anticipating that you'll fail, but also like you have to put yourself out there in order to succeed as well with relationships and everything. We've seen this multiple times, like Maki's dad comes back and beats him up, Toma's mom hates him for whatever reason, Itsuki's like mom poured boiling water on him and now he's like a ward of the state. This like weird stuff happens, and it's all about like the trust is betrayed and you have to relearn how to trust again. We kind of saw a little bit of this with the OG thing that I just mentioned. He doesn't trust his teammates, learned how to trust. Itsuki's changing in the changing room with everyone else. He's learned how to trust other people and put himself out there and be vulnerable again. Ooh, wholesome character development. Oh, the bar. It is episode 8. That's like the perfect halfway point. I think this is going to be like a 14 episode run or something weird like that. So we're like right in the halfway point, and then they're like, let's drop that Riverside episode. We know what that means. If you're near water, we know what that means at this point in anime. If you don't, I don't know what anime you've been watching, but every single one has this episode where they just do nothing. That being said, just to speak about the athletic side of it, it's like it's pretty much standard practice these days to like incorporate recovery and like best practice kind of upkeep protocol into your athletic routine. So if you played like a match like they did yesterday, the day after you would probably not do much, or you just do like a few little like upkeep sessions or maybe a little strength training, not too much like anything too endurance demanding or like cardio. But having a barbecue, I don't know if that's productive, but yeah, the concept is nice at least. The choice between venison and boar, I'm gonna be like, can I get some chicken up in this? Let me know in the comments, what do you think of like venison and boar and weird stuff like that? Of all the food they're having, I would probably eat like the yakisoba and that's it, or like 3 pieces of beef or something. The weird meats. Okay, I don't want to go into this too much. Just like, what are your barbecue picnic food recommendations? Let's look at this frame for a second, right? I'm not going to say the phrases are drawn inaccurately, but they are drawn pretty basically, which leads me to kind of deduce that the tennis scenes take up so much time that the team has very little, I would say, manpower to spend on the rest of the episode. But most of this episode was pretty much this tennis stuff. And I think we speculated last episode about how there was not really any production problem. It was just because of a baseball game going into overtime, which is fine. But I think going forward, we're going to have to look more for this weird like lapses in production value, because there's so much tennis and the tennis is so well done that I think we kind of lose focus on the rest of it. That's not really a problem for me as long as the directing and the shot and storyboard is interesting. I don't really mind if we're missing a few details in a face here and there, because it's TV anime at the end of the day. We're going to have to accept these compromises if we want to continue getting these shows on a weekly basis. But it's interesting to note that up till now we hadn't really noted this, but this is like the first time it's really stood out to me. I'm sure there are other examples in the past that I just missed, but it's like the first time this really stood out to me. This is something I've been thinking of recently, just because K-On! Came on Netflix recently, so I watched a couple of episodes of that, and I've been thinking about the parallels between K-On! And this show, because both of them are on the surface about one thing, but they're about completely different things, like underneath. This show is about tennis, apparently, although it's marketed purely on its character development, and K-On! Is like cute girls playing music. But underneath there's like character development, there's like people questioning whether they should be doing something, there's all this like transitioning from childhood into adolescence type stuff, which we've also seen here. But this show also has like the addition of like dealing with familial issues and addressing parental figures who maybe don't act like they you always thought they would. It just feels like the shows are very similar, but they're clearly made in two different times, because I feel like now the media in Japan is more permissive with what it will allow to be shown. I don't know if it would have been okay for them to show like an estranged dad come back to beat people up back in the day when K-On! Came out. It's just an interesting thing to keep in mind when watching the show. For some reason, I kept thinking about this show when I was watching K-On! Of course, we forgot to mention one very specific thing, which is that not only does Oji have these trust issues, one of our main characters has these trust issues. Toma has these trust issues because his mom doesn't like him and he put himself out there and she like shut him down at every opportunity. So now he's able to like conduct himself in this more like professional manner, which we see him when he's captaining the soft tennis club. But in these kind of relaxed atmospheric settings, he's like, what do I do? I'm usually so high strung. It's not cool to be high strung in situations like this. So people who are afraid that they might get like they might snap at like the drop of a hat or something, they kind of just retreat into their own shell and don't really come out and engage with people around them. You can see this a lot. Like wherever you go, there's always someone at the party who's like more reserved and standing in the back. But if a loud noise happens, they like flinch or whatever because they're on guard all the time. They're not really relaxed in any way. That's what we see with Toma here. It's pretty cool that even in like a half episode of going to the barbecue, we get this kind of like in-deep look into how Toma's mind works, as well as some of the other characters that are moving around, because we did get that little piece with Mitsue a couple seconds ago where they're talking about how she eats so much. Now, for someone who's not aware of like, is there a problem with that? You might think like, oh, who cares how much she eats? But it's like a thing whenever a girl eats anything in public, it's like they have to maintain this image of not eating too much, and if you don't, then it's like, why do you eat so much? Questions get asked, which if you're a dude, no questions get asked. So clearly they were commenting on that. And so this show is going out of its way to comment on all kinds of things like that. It's interesting to see. I kind of want to jump up and down right now whenever they play the OP during the ending. Is it the OP? Yeah, definitely the OP. Whenever they play the OP during some kind of like action scene at the end, it always gets me hype. It's never failed. I've been doing this for like years and years. Never ever fails to get me hype. It's like predictable. If you just do that, I'm gonna jump up out the window. Okay. That was a pretty interesting ending. Clearly, someone doesn't feel like calling things out for how they're going, so instead they report it to their parents. You know about this. It's that dude who doesn't take part in anything, or someone got punched in the face and they're like, oh, they're fighting in the backyard, and then suddenly everyone gets in trouble. It's interesting because it means that another person in that group doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to do all the things that they're doing. Maybe they're not so interested in soft tennis as everyone else is, or they just joined the club because they didn't want to do anything activity-wise, and now they're being kind of forced to do stuff because everyone else is doing stuff, and they don't feel like really complaining about it because they'd be singled out, so they go to their parents because they feel like they have no other choice. Ooh, an interesting end to a pretty interesting episode. Like, the episode itself was pretty interesting. This episode kind of was like an examination of how you should deal with trust issues. Like, Toma's still working through it to some degree, I guess, because his trust issues are more deep-seated in like who he is as a person because of how his mom treats him. Whereas Oji was able to like quickly overcome it and make friends with all of them basically instantly when he showed up to that barbecue. This show is like extremely solid and very consistent with the character development that it does on an episode-to-episode basis, and really there's no episode that I can think of where we didn't get some like look into a character that we hadn't seen before, or some development to a character that had been set up before and then paid off. So in this episode we got like Oji overcoming his shortcomings as a tennis doubles player. We got Itsuki like trusting everyone else and being comfortable changing with everyone else. We've got Toma admitting that he's not really good in these informal settings, but as soon as the coach or the teacher in charge of the club goes like, hey Toma, we need you for this official thing, he goes running in head first because he feels like that's what he's good at, the whole duty and official thing. So pretty solid episode 7. Speaking about jumping, I can't really jump anymore because I sprained the absolute crap out of my ankle. So we're going to be inside for a few weeks here, boys. Should be pretty interesting watching a sports show, not able to do any sports of your own, but hey, that's the way things happen. But that was Hoshiai no Sora, episode 7. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.